So today we shall be talking about the ECG. Okay, so first let us see what is an ECG and what is the importance of ECG, and then we shall talk about the different leads. Okay, the limb leads, the augmented leads. Then we shall talk about the chest leads. So what is an ECG? A ECG is a method of graphing. This is what we are doing. This is simply a graphic tracing of the electric current which is generated by the heart muscle. Okay, so during a heartbeat, the heart muscle, it generates an electric current, and this electric current is recorded through this ECG. Okay, this is recorded by an instrument called the electrocardiograph. And this electrocardiography, this is an important diagnostic tool for heart disease. It can give you information about the heart rate, the rhythm, in case you can get an idea about the different waves, P wave, QRS. Okay, so T waves and all, which we shall discuss in details later. It can also provide you an information about the orientation of the heart in the chest, the electrical effects of different medications, conduction disturbances, cardiac muscle mass, presence of ischemic changes. Okay, so these are the different things which we can get to know from the ECG. So before coming to the other details of the ECG, like this is the P wave, this is your QRS complex, this is a T wave, okay, and how to measure the heartbeat. Okay, so you know this, you can see this is one big box, and inside the big box you have got 5 small boxes. So about these we will discuss in details. First, let us talk about the different leads. Before coming to the different leads, first I shall tell you about the limb leads. Okay, so then I shall talk to you about the chest leads. So one by one we shall talk about it. So let us first come to the limb leads. So how many limb leads are present? Any idea? Yes, there are mainly 3 types of limb leads. Okay, so that is your lead 1, lead 2, and lead 3. Okay, so these are what are called as the limb leads. So these are this limb leads, there is the, these are they have got a positive electrode and a negative electrode. So remember, the lead 1, the positive electrode is present on the left arm and the negative electrode on the right arm. Okay, so lead 2, that is, this positive electrode is present on the left leg and the negative electrode is present on the right arm again. Okay, lead 3, the positive electrode is present on the left leg and the negative electrode is present on the left arm. Okay, so from just, I'll tell you easy way to remember. So you can see all these, the positive electrodes all are present on the right side. Okay, so right arm, left leg, and the negative 2 of them are in the right arm and the last one, that is in the left arm. Okay, so repeating once again, lead 1, the positive electrode. Therefore, you know, these, since they have one, they have got a positive and a negative electrode, therefore they are also called as the bipolar limb leads. Okay, so they are called as the bipolar. They have got 2 poles. It's a positive electrode and negative electrode. Okay, so so this is your, I can repeat once more, lead 1, positive electrode left arm, negative electrode right arm. Lead 2, right leg, right arm, left leg, sorry, left leg, right arm. Lead 3 is left leg, left arm. Okay, so next let us talk about the unipolar. This was about the bipolar limb leads. Next, let us talk about the unipolar limb leads. Unipolar limb leads, they are also called as the augmented leads. Okay, so they are called unipolar because they do not have a negative electrode. They mainly have a positive electrode only. So what are the different unipolar limb leads? These are again 3: AVR, AVL, and AVF. Okay, so right from the name only you can understand. Okay, so this is mainly, it is going to be position of the positive electrode. This is going to be in the right arm. Okay, so L, that is for your left arm, and F means foot. So instead of, this is the way you remember. So F, foot, this means your left leg. Okay, so what are you going to monitor? What can you monitor from this AVR? From this AVR lead, it monitors the base of the heart. Okay, this is used to, this is to monitor the base of the heart. AVL is the lateral surface of the heart, and AVF, that is the inferior surface of the heart. I repeat once more. AVR, this is the base of the heart. This is the lateral surface of the heart. This is a view of the heart. Okay, so from these leads, you can get this AVR, you can get a view of the base of the heart. AVL, you can get a view of the lateral surface of the heart. And AVF, you can get a view of the inferior surface of the heart. Okay, So after this, let us talk about the chest electrodes. So how many chest electrodes do you have? You have got 6 chest electrodes. Okay. Talking about the chest electrodes, you have got the V1, V2, V3, V4, V5, V6. Okay. So these are the 6 chest electrodes. So where are the chest electrodes present? So let us just say that, you know, just a schematic diagram. Okay. Let us say this is the first rib, the second rib, third rib, fourth rib, fifth. More are there below. So I just want to tell, I'll just tell you about this much. And you know the rest continuing from here. Okay. So if this is the first rib, second rib, this becomes your second intercostal space. Okay. So where is the lead V1 placed? Okay, so V1 that is going to be placed in the fourth intercostal space at the right sternal border. Okay, so remember, it is going to be placed at the fourth intercostal space, right sternal border. So this is your right sternal border. Okay, first, second, third, fourth. Okay, somewhere here it is going to be placed. Okay, so this is your fourth intercostal space, the right sternal border. Okay, so you have got your V1 lead. Okay, so here you are going to place your V1, right? So V2, the same place, this fourth intercostal space, it is going to be on the left sternal border. Same thing, but this is going to be on the left sternal border. V2 is on the left sternal border. Okay, V3 that is going to be midway. It is going to be midway between V2 and V4. I'll tell you where is V4. Then you can place the V3. It will be midway between V2 and V4. Where is V4? V4 is present in the fifth intercostal space. Fifth intercostal space in the mid clavicular line. Okay, suppose I say you, here is your clavicle, just a schematic diagram. Okay. So let us draw the mid clavicular line. Let us go up to the fifth intercostal space. So somewhere here is going to be your V4. Okay, so it is going to be in the fifth intercostal space, first rib, second, third, fourth, fifth intercostal space in the mid clavicular line. Here you are going to place your V4. Okay, so mid clavicular line, and V3 will be somewhere between this V2 and V4. Okay, then last, let us come to the last lead. There's not the last lead, sorry, the V5, and then you have got the V6 also. V5, this is going to be in the same level as that of the V4, but this is going to be in the anterior axillary line, you know, axilla. Okay, so in the anterior axillary line, the same line as that of the V4. Okay, the anterior axillary line, you know, you have got the anterior axillary, mid axillary. So, and V6, this is going to be in the mid axillary line at the same levels as that of V4 and V5. Here is going to be your V6. Okay, so I repeat once more. V1 is going to be fourth intercostal space, right sternal border. V2, fourth intercostal space, left sternal border. V3 between your V2 and V4. V4, fifth intercostal space, mid clavicular line. V5, this is going to be in the anterior axillary line. It's along the anterior axillary line in the same level as that of the V4 in the fifth intercostal space. Okay, and V6, this is going to be in the mid axillary line. Going to be in the mid axillary line in the same level as that of this V4 and V5. The level will be same. The position will be the mid axillary line. Okay, so this is about your different chest leads. Okay, so which portion of the what view of the heart are you going to get from this chest leads? Remember the V1. Okay, so this V1, this is going to provide you a view of the septum of the heart. You'll know this is very important in the ECG when you'll find V1, V2, V3. So if you note any changes in V1, this denotes changes in the septum of the heart. Okay, so if you see any changes, you know, in V3, V4, okay, so V3, V4, this mainly denotes the anterior surface of the heart. Okay, so this is very important. This denotes changes in the anterior surface of the heart. V2, this is also going to be the septum of the heart. Okay, so V1, V2 septum, V3, V4 anterior surface of the heart, and your V5, V6, these two are going to be the lateral surface of the heart. Okay, so these two are going to be the lateral surface of the heart. Okay, so this is how these are the different chest leads. Okay, so next what are we going to do is that we are going to now assess the rate, the heart rate. Okay, so there are mainly many methods are there of assessing the heart rate. So let us see the most common method which is used. So the most, if the rhythm is regular, so I'll tell you what you understand by a regular rhythm. So what do you understand by a regular rhythm? Regular rhythm means, there will be a normal velocity, normal pathways, and each this QRS will be preceded by a P wave. Okay, the heart rate will be approximately 60 to 100 beats per minute. These impulses will be arising from the SA node. They'll be having a normal conduction pathway with normal velocity. Okay, so all these denote a normal rhythm. So provided the rhythm is regular, that is, the RR, this interval, okay, so this remains constant. Okay, so if this doesn't remain constant, as we will see it in different cases of atrial fibrillation, and other things also, other certain some diseases also we'll discuss later. So if the RR rhythm, if the RR interval is not regular, then we can't use this method which I'm going to say you now. But if the rhythm is regular, then the easiest way is that just count the number of large squares between the ECG complexes, between this RR, between these two R, just count the number of the big squares. Okay, and remember this RR interval, it gives you the ventricular rate, and this PP interval, this is your first wave, is your P wave. You can see the first downward deflection is your Q, the first positive, in this QRS complex, this tall one is your R. Okay, QRS, again this negative deflection is S, this is your T. This one, if you can see here, this one is your T. Okay, so this is P, then it is followed by QRS, T. Okay, so this interval between this RR interval, so we have to calculate the number of large squares between this RR interval, and we are going to divide it by 300. Okay, so this gives us a estimate of the heart rate. So how many big squares can you see in between this 1, 2, 3? So it is 300 by 3, approximately 100. Okay, so and this is how you're going to calculate. Or if you want to be more precise, you can ask that what about these little small squares which we have left? So better if you can count the number of small squares, it is similar, but it is more accurate of determining the heart rate. So you have to count the number of small squares between this RR if you want to get the ventricular rate, and divide that number by 1500 by the number of small squares, or large squares 300 divided the number of large squares. Okay, so this is one method. You can calculate the heart rate if you find that the rhythm is regular. It is one of the most easiest way to calculate. So another way of calculating the heart rate is what we called as the 6-second method. Okay, so what is the 6-second method? Remember, I'll just draw. This is your P wave. This is your Q. This is your R. This is your S. And this is your T wave. P wave, the first Q, R, S, T wave. Okay. So as I showed you just now in the ECG, okay, so you have got like this big boxes. Okay. So, and in these big boxes, what did we see here? There was 5 small, can you see this row? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so again 1, 2, 3, 4. Can you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? Just I'll draw it here, and better you can see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so like this, there are 5 small boxes. Okay, so in the horizontally, there are 5 small boxes, and remember each small box, the time it denotes is 0.04 seconds. Okay, 0.04 seconds. That is the the duration which we determine from each small box. So if this is 0.04 seconds, so what will be the time duration of one big box? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 0.04 into 5 will give you 0.2 seconds. Okay, so each big box, big box, this will denote 0.2 seconds. So how many big boxes are going to give you 1 second? 0.2 into 5, that is equal to 1 second. That means there has to be 5 big boxes that is equal to 1 second. Isn't it 5 big boxes that is equal to 1 second? So why am I telling you all these things is that I want to tell you about the 6-second method of determining the heart rate. So in this we have to, so if 5 big boxes is equal to 1 second, so how many big boxes you need for 6 seconds? If 5 big boxes are 1 second, so obviously 30 big boxes that is equal to 30 big boxes that is equal to 6 seconds. So what is done is that if you find that the rhythm is not regular, you're not able to calculate it by the method I told you just now, that 1500 by the number of small squares or 300 by the number of big squares. If you're not able to calculate it by this method, what you can do is that you count 30 big boxes. 30 big boxes means 6 seconds. Okay. And you count how many are this QRS you're getting in these 30 big boxes. So 6 seconds, in 6 seconds you can get what is the rate. Okay, so what rate, how do we calculate? What do we say? 72 beats per minute. We say per minute. Per minute means 60 seconds. So whatever, how much, this intervals you get here, how many are intervals you get here. Okay, so you just multiply it by 10. So that will give you your estimate. Okay, I'll just repeat once more. Okay, so I repeat it to you once more. So remember, each small in a big box. Okay, so in this horizontally, okay, so you have got 5 small boxes, and each small box denotes 0.04 seconds. So one big box denotes 0.2 seconds. So you need 5 big boxes to make it equal to 1 second. Okay. So we need to calculate the number of these QRS complexes in a total duration of 6 seconds. So from simple mathematics, you can find out that if 5 big boxes are making up 1 second, so obviously 30 big boxes will make up 6 seconds. Okay. So you find out how many are this QRS intervals are present in 30 big boxes. Okay. So suppose you find out that there are 10, you can find out 10 QRS complexes in 30 big boxes, means there are 10 QRS complexes in 6 seconds. So to find out the number of QRS complexes in 60 seconds, okay, so you need to multiply this particular number with 10. Okay, so this gives you 100. So this means the heartbeat, the heart rate, not the heartbeat, the heart rate, okay, proper term, heart rate, it is 100 beats per minute. Okay, so this is the way also you can calculate the heart rate. Okay, so this is the called as a 6-second method, or these are the easier ones. Okay, if you find that the rhythm is regular. So next, how will you measure the rhythm? Okay, so whether the rhythm is okay or not, whether the rhythm is regular or not. So you have to measure the RR interval on 2 successive QRS complexes. Okay, so let's make here. Okay, so like this, you have to like this, there are like, I'll just show you this thing. See, this is the 2 successive, you have to measure this interval. Okay, so between 2 successive QRS complexes, and if this RR interval, okay, so this is similar, okay, so at least plus minus 10% distance between these R waves. Okay, so if this distance between these R waves is consistent, plus minus 10%, then the rhythm is considered to be regular. Okay. And what do you understand by irregularly? There are 2 things in rhythm which occurs. One is regularly irregular, and another is irregularly irregular. Irregularly irregular means like there is no, like it's completely irregular rhythm. Show you here. Okay, suppose let us say, okay, can see Like there is no like this distance. Okay, see, it's not constant. Okay, so this is less, this is less, this is further less. Okay, so like this, maybe again after some time you'll have another one. This is completely irregular rhythm. Okay, so irregular rhythm. Okay, so next we will be talking about the different waves, the P wave, the QRS complex and everything. So again, let's go back to this image. So this first wave, this is the P wave. So what does this P wave denote? This P wave represents the depolarization of the right and the left atria from the sinoatrial node. Okay, so this small P wave, it denotes the depolarization of the atria. Okay, and remember a normal P wave, okay, so it is usually less than 0.10 seconds in duration. Just a minute. Yes, so let us talk about this first. Let us talk about the P wave. Sorry, this is okay. Let us first talk about this P wave. So what is the normal duration of the P wave? The P wave, normally the duration should be less than 0.10 seconds in duration. Okay, and it should be approximately 2.5 millimeters high. So how are you going to find out this? So how are you going to find out the height? I'll just tell you once more. So this is a big box. Okay, so these are the boxes in the ECG. Okay, so I'll just show you here. So you can see this one, these are the big boxes. So inside the big boxes, how many small boxes are there in the horizontally? Horizontally, you can find 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. And vertically, how many small boxes are there? Again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So let us draw the same thing here. 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so and vertically also it has got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I told you the duration. What is the duration? The time, the seconds, seconds is 0.04 seconds. And what is the amplitude? Now, how do you measure? Okay, so the amplitude, the voltage amplitude and the vertical axis, remember this horizontal axis, this measures the duration of time. Okay. And this vertical axis, this vertical axis, this horizontal axis measures the duration of time. And this vertical axis, this is going to measure the voltage amplitude. Okay. And each small 1 millimeter square, the small square, this is of 1 millimeter. Okay, each small 1 millimeter square, this is of 0.1 millivolts in amplitude. Okay, so if you calculate what will be the amplitude of this big box, big square, this will be 0.5 millivolts in amplitude. Okay, so this is how you calculate the time, 0.4 seconds each small square. So each big square will be 0.2 seconds, and the amplitude, remember the small box, small square, this is 0.1 millivolts. So the big box will be 0.5 millivolts. Okay. So we were talking about this because we were talking about the P wave here. So we were discussing that the P wave, the normal duration of the P wave should be less than 0.10 seconds. Okay. And the amplitude, that should be approximately 2.5 millimeters high. Okay. So what does a tall P wave indicate? There are certain anomalies, like it can be like this also. You can get a tall P wave. So what does a tall P wave denote? A tall P wave, remember, it denotes the right atrial enlargement. Okay, so if there is any enlargement in the right atrium for any reason, okay, so if there is an enlargement in the right atrium, okay, so then you will get a tall P wave. Okay, so this is also called as P pulmonale. Tall P wave is also called as P pulmonale, and this is mainly seen in case of right atrial enlargement. Okay, and so then how will you what is the signal of a left atrial enlargement? In left atrial enlargement, you are going to get a broad and a bifid. It is going to be something like this. So there will be two peaks. Okay, so it will be a bit broader. What is the normal this thing? This should be less than 0.10 seconds. But here you will be getting a broader P wave, and there will be two humps like this. Okay, so this is a bifid, two bumps in the P wave. So this is also called as a bifid, P wave, or you can also say it's also called as the P mitral. P mitral. Okay, so this denotes an enlargement in the left atrium. enlargement in the left atrium. Okay, so next we need to know what do you understand by this PR interval. See, this is your P wave. Okay, so this is your QRS. Actually, most of the ECG, normal ECGs, usually this Q wave is missing. Therefore, we use the term, PR interval. So let me just show you here. If you can see from here, this is from the beginning of the P wave to the beginning of the R wave. Okay, so this is what is called as your PR interval. Okay, so what is the PR interval? It is the duration. It is the segment. Just a minute. Yeah. So what do you understand by the PR interval? Okay, so okay. So the PR interval, as you can see from this, that it is from the beginning of your, this is usually, it is measured in milliseconds. It extends from the beginning of the P wave until the beginning of this QRS complex. Okay, so until the beginning of this QRS complex. So, and the duration, it is normally 0.12 to 0.20 seconds. And what does this, what does this signify? So this mainly it signifies the intraarterial, the AV nodal, and the His-Purkinje conduction. Okay, so the impulse is getting conducted, from the atria to the AV node. Okay, so the AV nodal and the His-Purkinje conduction. Okay, so that is mainly it's reflected by the PR interval. Okay. So it is the interval between the beginning of the P wave, okay, so and the beginning, both the beginning, okay, beginning of P wave and the beginning of the QRS complex. So let us see certain anomalies. Okay, so what are the different, the different, what does the P wave, if you see certain abnormalities in the P wave, what does it denote? So two things I told you about the right atrial enlargement and the left atrial enlargement. Now there is one more situation where you won't find any P wave, okay. So P waves, okay, so they are absent in the particular situation. Okay, so where you won't find a P wave, you are mainly going to find the fibrillatory waves. Okay, so like this, you're going to find the fibrillatory waves like this. So what situation is this when you're going to find a fibrillatory wave and an irregular rhythm? Remember, this is a situation of atrial fibrillation. Okay, so when the atria is fibrillating, the atrial rate is very high. Okay, so usually the atrial rate, it becomes more than 300, okay, more than 350 in fact. Okay, so more than 350, it's atrial fibrillation. So in that situation, the P waves are absent. Okay, so this you can get as a MCQ also. P waves are absent in atrial fibrillation and before the ventricular premature beats. I think I've already discussed in the arrhythmia chapter. So what do you understand by premature beats and all? Okay, so before the regular beat, if you get another beat. Okay, so before that, in the refractory period, it is called as a premature beat. So this is one abnormality where the P waves are absent. Another abnormality, remember, usually what happens, all the P waves, they are followed. Okay, just a minute. So all the P waves, they are followed by a QRS complex. So normally this is what occurs. Okay, so all the P waves are followed by a QRS complex. So can there be a situation where there is a P wave, but it is not followed by a QRS complex? Suppose this is a P wave and there is only a P wave. There is no QRS complex. Again, there is a P wave, then it is again followed. In between there is a gap. There is no QRS complex here. Can this situation arise? Yes. Such type of situation usually arises in the block, in the second degree, third degree AV block. Okay. So we will discuss about the AV block in detail, the first degree AV block, second degree AV block, third degree AV block. But for the meantime, you remember, so what happens in the second degree AV block is that all the impulses which is generated from the SA node doesn't get conducted to the ventricles. Okay. So therefore, some of the, what happens is that there is the atrial contraction, but it is not followed by a ventricular depolarization. Okay, so because of this AV node, there is a block between this atria and the ventricles. Therefore, the impulse is not able to conduct from the atria to the ventricles. Therefore, you will find a missing QRS. You will find a P wave, but there is no QRS here. Okay, so this can occur in second degree AV block, and third degree. In second degree AV block, at least you can see some of the impulses that most of the impulses are getting transmitted. In between there might be a gap. Okay, so again, you'll find two more impulses here. When you will follow again, you'll find a P wave. Again, there is no QRS. Okay, so some impulses are getting blocked. Now, what happens in the third degree AV block? In the third degree AV block, usually there is the dissociation between the atria and the ventricles. The atria, they beat on their own, and the ventricles, they beat on their own. You can't find a relation. Usually what happens, after every P wave, you will find a QRS complex. You'll find a QRS complex. But in third degree AV block, the atria that beats on its own, and there is no, like, you won't find a relation between the P wave and the QRS complex. Okay, so like it can occur like this, this duration, this will vary, and this atria will beat on its own, and again you will find two P waves, again you will find this like this. Okay, so there is a lack of, there is this relation between this P wave and Q wave, that each P wave is followed by a QRS wave. This is completely lost in the third degree AV block, where the atria and the ventricles, they beat on their own. So there is a dissociation between the atria and the ventricles. So this is a condition where you will find that the P waves do not bear a relation with the QRS complex. Okay. So this is about the abnormalities of the P wave. Now let us see some abnormalities of the PR interval. Okay, so this is your PR interval, the beginning of the P wave to the beginning of this QRS complex. Okay, so what can be the reasons for the prolongation of the PR interval? So what do you think can be the reasons for the prolongation of the PR interval? What can be the reasons of this prolongation? What is the normal duration of this PR interval? It is 0.12 to 0.20 seconds. Okay, so if it becomes more than 0.20 seconds, we say that the PR interval is prolonged. Sorry, it's from here. It's the beginning of the P wave to beginning. Okay. So if it is more than 0.20 seconds, we say it's a prolongation of the P wave, PR interval. And if there's less than 0.12 seconds, we say that the PR interval is shortened. So what are the different reasons which can lead to the prolongation of this PR interval? So you should remember this one. In certain ischemic heart diseases, okay, IHDs, this can lead to the prolongation of the PR interval. In case of rheumatic fever, so you just have to remember these. Okay, so in rheumatic fever, so what happens actually in this, what happens is that the impulse is traveling from the atria to the ventricles. Okay, so any reason, any factor in which this impulse transmission from the atria to the ventricles is delayed, that will lead to a prolongation of the PR interval. Okay, so, and what else? In what others, there will be a delay in the conduction from the atria to the ventricles. Digitalis, digitalis delays the conduction from the atria to the ventricles. Digitalis. Any other, electrolyte abnormality? Yes, in case of hyperkalemia. Okay, so when the potassium levels increases, or when the calcium level increases. Okay, so in these are the conditions: hyperkalemia, okay, so calcium excess, hypothermia. Okay, so these are the conditions where there can be a prolongation of the PR interval. And what are the conditions where there will be a short PR interval? The impulse will quickly travel from the atria to the ventricles, even shorter than the time which it normally takes to travel. That is in just the opposite of these. That is in case when the potassium levels are low, calcium levels are low. In case of WPW syndrome, all these you must be already learned in the arrhythmias, WPW syndrome, and there is a bundle of Kent, so anatomical pathway connecting the atria and the ventricles. Okay, and this AV nodal rhythm, and your supraventricular tachycardia. Okay, so these are the different situations in which there will be a shortening of the PR interval. The PR interval will get shortened. Okay, so this is about your PR interval. Okay, next let us look at the Okay. Okay, next let us look at the QRS complex. Okay, so this is your again P wave, the QRS. I think it's become very broad. This is your P wave QRS complex. Okay, so this is first negative deflection, positive deflection, negative deflection, P. P. Okay, so this QRS complex, okay, this particular complex, you know, this QRS complex, this is going to denote the ventricular depolarization, and it has again got a normal duration of 0.04 to 0.10 seconds. Okay, so this is the normal. And these abnormal Q waves, usually, you know, this Q waves, abnormal Q waves, they usually occur in the myocardial infarction and in the hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. Okay, so these are the conditions when you are going to get the abnormal Q waves. Q waves, abnormal Q waves. In case of, I told you this, the first negative one is the Q wave, then this positive deflection is the R wave, then the negative deflection is the S wave. Okay. So this Q waves, abnormal Q waves, you can get in myocardial infarction and in case of hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. Okay, and if you find that the Q wave has become very wide, you know, okay, this is not positive. The first always is a negative one. Okay, so if the Q wave has become very wide, this wide and bizarre Q waves, this is usually seen in cases of the ventricular ectopics, ventricular tachycardia. Okay, so if there is any ectopic which is arising from the ventricles, or in case of ventricular tachycardia, okay, so or in sometimes in case of supraventricular tachycardia also, where there is an aberrant conduction. Okay, so the conduction is aberrant. In those supraventricular tachycardia also you can find a, but mainly the bizarre and wide QRS is found in ventricular ectopics and the ventricular tachycardia. Okay, now if there is an increase, now I told you this width. Okay, so if the width is increased, then it is, you know, mainly because of ventricular ectopics or ventricular tachycardia. What if the height has become very increased, you know, enlarged height? Okay, what will happen if there is an increase in the height? So increase in the height, there is a criteria that I'll tell you later on. But increase in the height of the QRS, it may indicate right or left ventricular hypertrophy. Okay, there is a hypertrophy in the ventricles. Okay, so right or left ventricular hypertrophy. So this I'll tell you in details. There are some criteria, okay, so which has to get fulfilled. So let me just tell you the criteria now only. So what is the criteria of the left ventricular hypertrophy and what is the criteria of the right ventricular hypertrophy? By looking at the QRS complex, how can you say whether the right ventricle has hypertrophied or the left ventricular has hypertrophied, or is it normal? Okay, let us first look at the left ventricular hypertrophy. Remember, let me again take out the ECG. Yes, look at this ECG. So already I have discussed about the different ECG, about the different leads has already been discussed to you. These are your limb leads, these are your augmented leads, these are your chest leads. Okay, and I told you which lead is going to denote what. Okay, so if you do remember, what was AVR denoting? The base of the heart. L AVL lateral. F inferior surface, V1, V2 the septum, V3, V4 the anterior surface of the heart. Okay, and V5, V6 the lateral surface of the heart, right? Lead one, I think this I didn't tell you. Lead one, that was mainly denoting the lateral surface of the heart, and 2, 3, these are mainly denoting the inferior surface of the heart, inferior border of the heart. Okay, so now let us just discuss quickly that you know, how will you see a left ventricular hypertrophy? For diagnosing a left ventricular hypertrophy, you have to mainly, you have to add up the you know, the waves, the length of the waves in the V1. Okay, the S wave in the V1, remember, the S wave, okay, the S wave in the V1 and the R wave in lead V5 or V6. See, the R wave is prominent in V5 and V6, whereas the S wave is seen here in the V1. So I'll tell you a little bit about the axis deviation also. This axis deviation is also important. So just I'll complete this and we'll talk about the axis deviation. So axis deviation, I'll take a separate class for the axis deviation. Just I'll tell you about the axis deviation in short. So remember this V1, this wave. Okay, so this wave, this S wave in V1 plus the R wave in V5 or V6, not both, either V5 or V6. Add up these two, or you can add up V1 plus V5, S of V1 plus R of V5, or S of V1 plus R of V6. If these two, this length, this becomes more than 35 millimeters. So you can very well calculate, so, one small box equals to 1 millimeter, the big box is 5 millimeters. So accordingly, you can calculate if the sum of these two, S of V1 and R of V5, or S of V1 and R of V6, becomes more than 35 millimeter. Okay, so this is one criteria of your left ventricular hypertrophy. What else? The second is, if the S wave, okay, so then the second one is, you can also look at the AVL. Okay, so this AVL, okay, so can you see this AVL? AVL, if the R wave in AVL is more than 12 millimeters, only alone single criteria, only AVL, you measure the R wave of this AVL. If it is more than 25 millimeter, 12 millimeters, I'm so sorry, it's more than 12 millimeters. Okay, so this can occur in the left ventricular hypertrophy. Okay, and there is one more thing, in systolic overload. Okay, so in this left ventricular hypertrophy, in systolic overload, sometimes what happens is that the Q waves in lead one. Okay, so often in lead one you will have the Q waves. So in the lead one, the Q waves, AVL, can see a small Q wave in this AVL. Here it is seen also, it is prominent here. So the Q waves in systolic overload, remember the Q waves in 1, AVL, okay, and V5, V6. We are all talking about the lateral leads. Okay, so 1, AVL, V5, V6. Usually the Q waves in these 4 leads, they disappear. They may disappear. Okay, so the ST segment, after this, I'll be talking to you about the ST segment. Okay, so QRST, this segment between this S and T, this ST segment. Okay, so that becomes inverted, ST becomes depressed, and the T wave becomes inverted. But this may happen or may not happen. Okay, this is can be seen in the systolic overload. And what happens in the diastolic overload? In the diastolic overload, just the opposite of what I told you just now. In the leads 1, AVL, V5, V6, the Q wave becomes more deep, and the T wave, instead of becoming inverted, it will become taller. So that I shall tell you again later, but this much at least to remember, that in V1, the left ventricular hypertrophy, the two criteria which I told you, V1 S wave, V5 or V6 R wave more than 35 millimeter, or AVL, the R wave is more than 12 millimeters. Okay. And what is right ventricular hypertrophy? How will you diagnose right ventricular hypertrophy? Mainly there is right axis deviation. Again, I'll tell you about the deviation just after this. Right axis deviation. And there is a predominant R wave in V1 or V2. Either in V1 or V2. Usually there are the in V1 and V2 the R waves that is not prominent in V1, V2. Okay, so if the R wave is prominent, or you can say the R by S ratio, if it becomes more than 1, or the R wave is more than 5 millimeters in V1, remember V1, V2, where usually the R wave is not prominent. Here, if you find that the R wave is prominent, or the ratio between the R and the S wave is more than 1, or the R wave in V1 is more than 5 millimeter, that denotes a right ventricular hypertrophy. Okay, or what you can do is that the sum of the R wave, okay, so the R wave in V1 and or V1 or V2, or okay, either V1 or V2, any one, you take the R wave, and the S wave in V5 or V6. So the S wave, you add up the R from V1 or V2 plus the S wave from V5 or V6. And if the sum comes more than 10 millimeters, the sum of this R wave from V1 or V2 plus the S wave from V5 or V6 becomes more than 10 millimeters, it also signifies the right ventricular hypertrophy. Okay. So what are the different causes of the tall R waves in V1? Just now I told you it can be a right ventricular hypertrophy, because if you find a tall R wave in this V1, it indicates a right ventricular hypertrophy, or it can also indicate dextrocardia. What is dextrocardia? Usually the heart is located on which side of the, it is located on the left side, okay, so of the chest. So if it is located on the right side, that is called as dextrocardia. So often you have to again see, you have to differentiate. This is not the only way you can say that it is dextrocardia. You have to get the echo done and all, okay. So yeah, V1, if it's a tall R wave in this V1, so it indicates the heart is located on the right side, dextrocardia, or it's a right ventricular hypertrophy, or it is a right bundle branch block. Okay, so these terms we'll discuss again in details. Right bundle branch block. Okay, so if there is a right bundle branch block, or if there is a hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, so it will result in a tall R waves in V1. Just write it down here. So what are the causes of the tall R waves in V1? Tall R waves in V1, the first most important, right ventricular hypertrophy. Then you have got your right bundle branch block. Okay, so it can be a case of dextrocardia, or it can be a case of hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. Hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. Okay, so these are the different things which can occur if you find a tall R wave in the V1. Okay, so after this, after talking about the QRS, okay, so let us talk about the ST segment. Just now we saw here ST segment. We were talking about the ST segment. So which is the ST segment here? So ST segment, remember, it is the small segment, usually this straight line, the straight segment which you can see. It is from the end of the QRS to the beginning of the T wave. Okay, so from the end of the QRS to the beginning of the T wave. Draw here once more. Okay, just this small interval, this interval, this is your ST segment. Okay, so this is from the end of the QRS to the beginning of the T wave. Okay, so usually this ST segment, it should be a straight line, but if it is elevated or if it is depressed, then it can indicate different diseases. Okay, so different symptoms, like usually the ST segment is elevated. You must have often heard this term STEMI, ST segment elevated MI. So usually when the patient suffers from myocardial infarction, we usually look at this ST segment. Okay, so usually in the patients of myocardial infarction, what happens is that this ST segment, this becomes elevated. Okay, this is your ST segment, which was a straight line, it has become elevated. Okay, so ST segment elevation can occur in different ischemic heart diseases. It can occur in different conduction blocks also. Okay, and whereas this segment can also be depressed certain times. In case of angina, again in case of ischemic heart diseases, this can occur. Okay, so this ST segment, okay, so this can become depressed. Okay, so ST segment, in case if you find a patient has come to you, you can find ST segment in elevation in all the leads except AVR and V1. Okay, so what will happen if you find the ST segment elevation in all the leads except in these two leads, AVR and V1? Only in AVR and V1. Okay, so it's normal. Rest in all the leads you can find a ST segment. Remember, this indicates acute pericarditis. Okay, so just immediately you go for the troponin markers and all. And usually what happens is that if there is ST segment, just now I told you that if you find the ST segment elevation in the leads, you have to accordingly look into, just now as I told you, V1 V2 means the septum of the heart, V3 V4. If you find ST segment elevation V3 V4, this means anterior myocardial infarction. Okay, you immediately have to go for the troponin markers. Okay, or if you find the ST segment elevation in AVL V5 V6, remember I told you lead 1 is lateral lead, AVL is lateral lead, V5 and V6 are lateral leads. So you look for all the lateral leads. If you find ST segment elevation in all the lateral leads, it means the myocardial infarction has affected the lateral surface of the heart, the lateral surface of the heart. Okay, so similarly, if you find the accordingly, if you find if there is elevation in this lead 2 and lead 3, this means the inferior surface of the heart, okay, so that has been affected. But if you find ST segment elevation in all the leads except AVR and V1, okay, so that usually indicates acute pericarditis. Okay, and there are certain situations where you can also find the ST segment depression. Can you see this ST segment? This will go below. Okay, so it will be depressed. The ST segment depression that usually occurs with hypokalemia. Remember, you have seen this ST segment here, ST segment. This is your ST segment, ST segment. Okay, so this depression, this can occur in hypokalemia when the potassium levels they go down, or it can also occur in digitalis. Okay, if there is digitalis toxicity, okay, some drugs like digitalis that can also produce the ST segment depression. Sometimes in ischemic heart diseases, unstable angina and all, it can also produce a ST segment depression. So these are your different ST segment is a very important marker, okay, of many, of many diseases, of ischemic heart diseases, conduction blocks, so that you'll know details when you study about the ECG, reading the ECGs in details. Okay. Then last, let us talk about the T waves. Remember this T wave. Okay, so this is going to represent the, see here, this is your atria has depolarized, here ventricles depolarized. Now what is going to occur here? Obviously the ventricles are going to repolarize. Okay, so this T wave, this is going to indicate your ventricular repolarization, So here also you have got certain abnormalities. So you can find the inverted T waves. Again, inverted T waves is a very important, usually the T wave is like this upright. Okay, so but if it becomes inverted T waves, okay, that is often found in the ischemic heart diseases. Again, IHDs, you can find the ischemic heart diseases, you can find inverted T waves. Okay, so bundle branch blocks. Okay, so bundle branch blocks also you can find the inverted T waves, atrial fibrillation with rapid ventricular rate, PSVT. Okay, so these you can find this inverted T waves. And remember, tall peaked T wave, often you get in MCQs, very common, this tall peaked T wave. This usually is seen in case of hyperkalemia when the potassium levels are very high. So it usually occurs in tall peaked T waves, occurs in hyperkalemia. Okay, so tall peaked T wave is seen in hyperkalemia. Okay. Okay, next last portion, that is, let us see what is this QT interval. Okay, just now I told you about the ST segment. This red, this thing is your ST segment, Okay, so what do you understand by the QT interval? Okay, so QT interval. So QT interval is this entire interval, right from the beginning of the QRS complex to the end of this T wave. This entire interval from the beginning of the QRS to the end of the T wave, this is called as your QT interval. See, this was this thing from the end of the QRS complex to beginning of T wave. This was your ST segment. Okay, and from the beginning of the QRS complex to the end of the T wave, this is your QT interval. Okay, so there is one more term which is called as corrected QT interval. Okay, so corrected QT interval. QT interval, it is important because often you must have heard about, the QT prolongation. You must have heard that many drugs cause QT prolongation. There are some patients who have got a congenital QT prolongation. You must have often heard the patients who have got a QT prolongation, there are increased risk of polymorphic ventricular tachycardia. Suddenly they develop cardiac arrhythmias. Okay, sudden death. Okay, so therefore QT interval is important. And there is a term which is called as corrected QT interval. So corrected QT interval, the formula, remember, it is derived using the formula that's called as Bazzett's formula. So corrected QT interval equals to QT interval divided by square root of the RR interval. So you calculate the interval between RR. Okay, so and you divide it square root of the RR interval. So this gives, usually we use this QTC, the corrected QT interval. Okay, so QT interval, this QT interval, it should be less than 0.45 seconds. So if it becomes more than 0.45 seconds, if it becomes more than 0.45 seconds, it is abnormal. Okay, so where can you see QT interval more than 0.45 seconds. Let us draw a so this is a prolonged QT interval. Okay, so it has become more than 0.45 seconds. So where can you see this QT interval more than 0.45 seconds? So one congenital. So there are some people who have got this congenital QT prolongation. They are called as congenital QT prolongation syndrome, or it can also be seen in patients of hypokalemia and hypocalcemia. Okay, so in potassium levels, if they fall or if the calcium levels are decreased, okay, so that can also cause a prolonged QT interval. Okay, and remember this prolonged QT interval. So as I told you just now, prolonged QTC, usually we use the word QTC interval. Prolonged QTC interval, they produce Torsades T points. This was also discussed. Torsades T points, polymorphic ventricular tachycardia. Okay, so Torsades, usually it precipitates, it can produce this polymorphic ventricular tachycardia, Torsades T points, and sudden cardiac death. Okay, similarly, if a patient has got short, if the QT interval is less than 0.32 seconds, this is also risky. Okay, this is called as short QT syndrome. Short QT syndrome can also predispose to cardiac arrhythmias and cardiac sudden death. Okay, so this is all about the ECG, which I told you. So about in ECG, I discussed with you about the different leads. Okay, so the placement of the leads, where do you place the leads? Okay, so what do the different leads indicate? Okay, so what does AVR, AVL, AVF? Okay, so V1 to V6. Okay, so which surface of the heart? Okay, so it gives you a view of which surface of the heart. Lead 1, 2, 3. I told you about the limb leads, chest leads. Then I told you about the different waves. Okay, so the importance of these waves. Okay, so what do these waves denote? The different abnormalities of these waves. And the last part which I want to say you is about your axis, okay, which in fact I should have mentioned this earlier, but forgot to mention about it. So let me just tell you about the axis. Okay, so what do you understand? How do you calculate the QRS axis? Okay, so remember your QRS axis, be here. Just tell you about the axis. Yeah. Look, so this is your, we have divided the normal. Can you see here this line, this normal QRS axis? So remember this normal QRS axis. Can you look at this pink portion? This denotes the normal QRS axis. So the normal QRS axis, that is from -30 to +90. Okay, and there is a left axis deviation. If you can see this green color, okay, so this left axis deviation, when this axis lies between -30 to -90. Okay, and if you can see this right axis deviation, this light blue color, it indicates an axis between +90 to +180. It indicates right axis deviation. And if you can see this yellow color, if the axis lies between -90 to 180, it indicates extreme axis deviation. Okay, sometimes this can occur if the patient has dextrocardia, or if there has been some misplacement of the leads. You have misplaced. You have reversal of electrodes of lead 1 and lead 2. That can also lead to extreme axis deviation. So normally the axis of the leads 1. Okay, so this, can you see, these are the different leads which have been written: lead 1, 2, AVF, 3, AVR, AVL. So usually the leads of the axis of the leads 1 and this AVF. Okay, so this is these two leads. Okay, so you can see here these two leads, they are usually used to calculate the axis of the QRS complex. Okay, so remember one thing. So here I would like to mention that. Okay, so I shall be discussing about the approach to determine the axis. There are multiple methods of determining the electrical axis. So I shall tell you mainly about the lead and the 3-lead approach. So you can see here, so mainly these 3 leads, the AVL 1 and the lead 2. Okay, so this mainly I'm sorry, the lead 1, the lead 2 and the lead AVF. Okay, so these are the 3 leads, okay, so which mainly the positive ends of these leads, okay, they fall under the within the normal axis. Okay, the normal axis, as I told you, it is from you can see this this pink portion. Okay, so this normal axis that ranges from -30 to +90. Okay, so the positive ends of these 1, 2 and AVF. Okay, so this falls in this normal axis region. Okay, so one simple way, to learn how to determine the axis deviation is that you can inspect the leads 1 and the lead AVF. Okay, so this method in which you are inspecting two leads, that is called as the quadrant approach, or it is also called as two lead approach, lead 1 and lead AVF. Okay, so again I repeat to you, so that this pink portion. Okay, so this represents the normal QRS axis. Therefore, so if both the leads, okay, so lead 1, okay, so and this lead AVF, okay, so if both of them are positive, then the axis falls within this normal axis range. Okay, now if the lead 1 is positive and the lead AVF, okay, so that is negative. Okay, so what it will be then? What will be the axis? Then it is going to be, you can just see lead 1 positive and this lead AVF is negative. Can you see this negative end of lead AVF? So this will come under the left axis deviation. Okay, so I repeat once more, lead 1 positive, lead AVF positive. Okay, so that is your normal axis. If lead 1 is positive, lead AVF, okay, so this is negative. You can see this upper portion. Okay, so this lead AVF, okay, so this is negative. Then there is left axis deviation. Now, if the lead 1, okay, so now if the lead 1 is positive, yeah. Now if the lead 1 is negative, okay, so lead 1 is negative and AVF, okay, so that is positive. Okay, so lead 1 is negative, okay, so and your AVF is a positive. Lead 1 negative, AVF positive, that comes under the right axis deviation. Okay, so this is the way you can remember. This is just at present for this. I'll take another separate class on this axis deviation that we shall discuss in details. Okay, so about this different axis. Okay, so what are the factors which is determining, just for the meantime, just for determining the axis deviation. And this is a simple way of determining by examining the lead 1 and AVF, both positive normal axis, one positive, the AVF negative left axis, one AVF positive, one negative, lead 1 is negative. Then what am I talking? What is this negative and positive? I'm mainly talking about the QRS. Okay, so you have to examine the QRS complex. Okay, so in if you find that the lead 1 is positive and the lead AVF is negative, then it is a right axis deviation. Okay, and what will happen if both of them are negative? Can you see this yellow portion? This both lead 1 and lead AVF. Okay, so if both of them are negative, it indicates extreme axis deviation. Okay, so this is what is called as a quadrant approach. So there is an issue with this quadrant approach, is that it gives only a close approximation of the true axis. It narrows, but it narrows down the normal axis range. Sometimes it can also result in inaccurate interpretation of the true electrical axis. But however, for most of the situations, this is the way we are going to determine the axis. So there is one more, a little bit more accurate approach than the simple this quadrant approach. That is, you are taking into account three leads now. Okay, so earlier we were taking only the lead 1 and the lead AVF. Now we are going to take into account lead 1, lead 2, and this lead AVF. Okay, so this is called as the three lead approach. Okay, so in this, you have to first look at the net QRS deflection. If it is positive in both lead 1 and lead 2, this means that the QRS, this axis is normal. Okay, so but if it is positive in lead 1, so but it is negative in lead 2. So if it is positive in lead 1, but it is negative in lead 2, so what does it indicate? It indicates that there is left axis deviation. Okay, so you can just see in both these cases, we were not taking this AVF into account. Just by taking lead 1 and lead 2, lead 1, lead 2, both positive, normal axis, lead 1 positive, lead 2 negative, this indicates a left axis deviation. Okay, so now if the lead 1 is negative, okay, so then you look next to the lead AVF. I repeat once more. See, first we take the lead 1 into account. If the lead 1 is positive, okay, so then no need of looking into the lead AVF. just go and have a look into the lead 2. If it is also positive, it is a normal axis deviation. If lead 2 is negative, it is a left axis deviation. Now, if the net deflection, net QRS deflection in lead 1 is negative, then you look at the lead AVF. Okay, next you look at the lead AVF. Now, if the lead AVF is positive, okay, so if the lead AVF is positive, then the axis is rightward. However, if the lead AVF is also negative, then again it means an extreme axis deviation. Okay, so if the lead 1 is negative, plus if the lead 1 is negative and the lead AVF is positive, so what does it indicate? Right axis deviation. If the lead 1 is negative plus the lead AVF is also negative, what does it indicate? It indicates extreme axis deviation. Okay, so this is a way. There is another simple way, it is to locate the most isoelectric limb along the frontal plane. So anyhow, till for today's discussion, you can remember these two methods, the quadrant approach and the three lead approach. The quadrant approach is most commonly used. You mainly look at the lead 1 and the lead AVF. So let me just summarize it here once more. The lead and the lead AVF, if it is positive in both the leads, okay, so what does it mean? It is a normal axis. Okay, so it's a normal, right? So then when do you say it is a left axis deviation? So we say it is a left axis deviation when there is a, in the quadrant method, just a second. Okay, lead 1 plus AVF. Okay, so let's write it down this way. There are three situations. Okay, so both are positive, it is normal. If the another situation, the lead 1 is positive, another situation, the lead 1 is negative. Okay, so if the lead 1 is positive and the lead AVF, okay, so that comes out to be negative. Okay, so you say it is a left axis deviation. The lead 1 is negative, AVF is positive, you say it is a right axis deviation. And what will happen if both of them are negative, lead 1 and lead AVF? Okay, so if both of them are negative, okay, so you say it is an extreme axis deviation. Okay, so you can just remember this one. This is your quadrant method. Okay, so extreme axis deviation. Okay, so let us just look at some of the abnormalities. Okay, so when will you find, a situation of left axis deviation and right axis deviation? Remember the left axis deviation. So this is found, left axis deviation, you can mainly find it, in cases of whenever there is left ventricular hypertrophy, okay, sorry, left bundle branch block or left anterior hemi block. Okay, so or also in cases of the Wolff-Parkinson syndrome. I'm just talking about the main ones. Okay, the ASD, mainly the ostium primum type. Or sometimes also you can get the left axis deviation in case of the inferior wall myocardial infarction. So myocardial infarction, the inferior wall myocardial infarction also, sometimes we get the left axis deviation. Okay, so right axis deviation, you get it, just you write left ventricular hypertrophy. This is your right ventricular hypertrophy. Sometimes in case of COPD patients also, you get a right axis deviation. Okay, or you get it in ASD. This is ostium primum type. In ostium secundum type, you get the right axis deviation. Okay, so this is about, and I told you in the beginning only extreme axis deviation. Sometimes, when there is misplacement of the leads, when there's reversal of the electrodes of 1 and 2. Okay, so, or in case of dextrocardia, you can get the extreme axis deviation. Okay, so this is about your axis deviation. So here we have discussed about the basics of ECG. Then we shall study in the next class about the different types of the cardiac arrhythmias.